Intuitively, from the beginning, I recognized that we were dealing with an extraordinarily dangerous situation. And the chaos of all of that was really what I was focusing on. But certainly in the back of my mind, there was the very serious concern that we would lose lives.
On November 8th, 2018, the Camp Fire, which has become California's most deadly and destructive wildfire to date, killed 86 people. Their names and their stories are still being told, and the memories of them will live on in those who remember. But I want to tell you a different story, one that details what it took to gather what remained of the victims and bring their families closure.
I have come to believe that this is one of the most complex mass casualty incidents that any public safety officials had to deal with.
Butte County Sheriff Corey Honey, who became one of the most recognizable figures of the Camp Fire, was responsible for leading the search effort for the missing and the dead.
One of the comments that was made to me by one of the FEMA representatives is that based on the experience that they had, I should anticipate somewhere around 450 to 500 fatalities.
Based off of what had transpired on the 8th, I believe that we probably were looking at hundreds of victims.
Before November 8th, Lieutenant Stephen Collins ran the Butte County Sheriff's Detectives Unit. That all changed after the Camp Fire, when Honey tapped him to head up the coroner's team. It'd be his responsibility to search 18,000 structures and more than 150,000 acres for the dead.
It was overwhelming. I felt inadequate for the job.
I do think that our situation was distinguishable in that, for example, an airplane crash, you have a passenger list, so you know who was on that plane and you have a starting point in terms of who you're looking for. We didn't have that.
Collins gathered who he could. The already small department was spread pretty thin, and sent them east of Paradise, where the fire had already passed through. That's where they'd start their search.
My sergeant told me that there were 4 burned out cars with 5 victims inside. I was under the impression that I was going to be picking up 5 full bodies. And when I got there, I found that the fire had burned so hot and so fast that what I was picking up were tiny bits of bone and ash.
Jennifer Celentano is an investigative assistant at the Butte County Sheriff's Office. As a trained anthropologist, she was one of the members of Collins' team working to identify human remains in the rubble.
So when we first arrived, we arrived with body bags, which wasn't what we needed. We needed paper bags, and so we kind of had to transition and make use of what we had for that first case because we just had no idea what we were walking into. I would pick up a bone and it would just crumble to ash.
Sheriff Honey had already set the precedent that every structure, every acre of land would be searched, but Collins' small teams were moving too slowly. They needed help.
I knew what I had to do, and I came in and I said, we're gonna bring in the anthropologist and search and rescue. I want every search and rescue team I can get.
We confirm that, it's a windy road.
Local, state, and national search and rescue teams responded, and volunteers filled in the gaps. Collins got what he wanted and more.
We utilized the search and rescue and the urban search and rescue for going through and clearing properties, making them safe, and searching and finding remains. We would then send the coroner investigators and anthropologists, once they did find remains, and figure out whether they're human or not. If they're human, they'd go ahead and do the recovery.
We broke everything into areas, and then we searched the entire area, house by house. It was just one assignment after the next. As soon as you dropped off, you went back, and it continued for days and days and days.
Meanwhile, Sheriff Honey was trying to figure out what to do with the remains the teams were finding. Butte County doesn't have a central morgue, and they needed somewhere to house them to begin figuring out who they were.
We immediately called upon Sacramento County and asked if they would be the location where we would send the remains and then be able to utilize their facility to help us again determine the cause and manner and identity.
Up until the Camp Fire, the largest mass fatality incident Sacramento County Coroner Kim Jin had handled was 5 victims. By late November 2018, she was handling 85 victims.
The number is not really of consequence. It's how we how we take care of each person that comes through here.
Jen was expecting the call from Sheriff Honey. She'd helped Butte County in the past with death investigations, and when she saw what the Camp Fire was doing up in Magalia, Paradise, and Concow, she knew they'd probably need her team's assistance.
So we just took over the identification and examination portion, the scientific portion. With fire victims, very few can actually be identified by fingerprints. We only had 5 that we identified by fingerprints.
Enter Andy, a Boston area biotechnology company that saw what Butte County was dealing with and reached out to help, offering their rapid DNA machine to run DNA samples in hopes of quickly identifying the collected human remains.
It was incredible. All of a sudden we just started getting all these identifications. I had never seen anything like that. When we send DNA to DOJ, it typically takes us 6 months to a year to get anything back. And these guys are producing things in a month. You know, we had 24 people identified by DNA in 1 month. I mean, that's amazing. That's just incredible stuff.
While some of the Camp Fire victims were able to be identified by dental records, and in some cases, even histology slides provided by the California Department of Justice, most identities were determined by rapid DNA. Without it, Jen says families would still be waiting for answers.
I don't think that we can go back to using regular DNA processes. I think we need to move forward and make sure that rapid DNA is ingrained into whatever training we have, and we have that ability to use it, and we owe it to whatever victims in the future to make sure we don't go backwards but go forwards.
It's been nearly a year since the Camp Fire tore through Butte County, and almost all of the victims' families have been notified of the recovery of their loved ones' remains, all except 2.
It bugs me that two people that we can't identify and account for them being there. Whoever they are, they more than likely have some family somewhere.
No one has come forward claiming they lost a friend or a family member who hasn't already been identified, and the DNA profiles officials were able to get from the unidentified remains didn't match any of the ones they had on file.
Genealogy DNA is actually going to play a pretty big part in these final identifications.
For the first time, Sacramento and Butte County officials are turning to genealogical databases to identify victims of a mass casualty incident. They hope to find a familial match to someone who may not have known one of their family members was killed in the fire, but recognize the privacy concerns people have after the databases have been used to identify criminal suspects like the Golden State Killer.
My hope is that the administrators of these databases would draw a distinction between what we're trying to do, which is identify the next of kin of people who, tragically perish in a fire, versus utilizing it to identify, criminal suspects.
Honey's not sure if they'll ever know the names of the 2 sets of remains left unidentified, but he's not giving up. No one's giving up. But they are starting to reflect on what this wildfire has meant when it comes to a mass casualty response, and how they'll be better prepared if it ever happens again.
I thought we were very prepared, and we weren't.
We did the best we could, but I couldn't say that we found everyone. I mean, over 18,000 structures and over 150,000 acres. I couldn't be certain.
For every single member of this community, and probably for a lot of members in other communities, the Camp Fire had an impact on our life. No one escaped that impact, and it changed our lives forever.